Hello students, welcome back, and today we are on the fifth chapter of supplementary reading. So quick, so good, so done well. Coming to the fifth chapter, Footprints Without Prints, and this is also the name of the book of your supplementary reading. This is a very interesting chapter. This is fun, this is science, and this is some kind of moral lesson also for everyone. This is actually a novel which is written by H.G. Wells, as you can see, and some part of that novel or some short summary of that novel has been printed over here in the form of a chapter in your book. Let's move ahead and see what's in store. Looking at the introduction, there is a question in the beginning. Can a man become invisible? We might have seen these things in the movies, and we see that yes, it is possible in movies that a person can become invisible. But in reality, still we haven't seen any kind of experiments which actually prove this thing. So this is the story of a scientist who discovers how to make himself invisible. Okay, so yes, the main hero, or you can say the protagonist, or the main person or the central person of this chapter is a scientist who has actually discovered through experiments or different things that how to make oneself completely invisible. Does he use or misuse his discovery? Yes, this is the question. When a person becomes invisible, it becomes a moral duty not to harass the society and to live a very comfortable and peaceful life rather than bringing some sort of nuisance or troubles for others. So, is this scientist a good one or a bad one? That the story will tell us. The first paragraph. The two boys started in surprise at the fresh muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. Okay, so in the beginning, we see that there are two boys, and both these boys are surprised. So they had a look at something, and because of which they are surprised. What is that they have had a look at? At the fresh muddy imprints. Okay, muddy imprints. That means if someone has put his or her foot in the mud, and that mud is completely wet, and if we walk, what happens? The print of that foot are posted on the floor. And this is what they were seeing. Muddy imprints of a pair of bare feet. Bare feet means feet without wearing any kind of shoes, chappals, or slippers. Okay. So they saw, these two boys saw that there were imprints, means there were posters of some bare feet that were inside the mud, and they could see the print on the floor. So something that they were really shocked at, that who has walked on this area, there are bare feet imprints on the place. What was a barefooted man doing on the steps of a house? So at what place we can see these footprints? These footprints were there on the steps of a house, and that too in the middle of London. So they were thinking, who has come over here in the middle of London, means in the proper central city of London, and we can just see someone walking without shoes. And this they have made out just because of the front, because of the imprint or because of the footprints that were muddy. And where was the man? That is the question. If someone has walked on this place, who is that person? And if that person has walked, why that person is walking without shoes? As they gazed, gaze means to look carefully, a remarkable sight met their eyes. Met their eyes, that means they saw something over here. They saw something remarkable, something that they were not able to believe. A fresh footmark appeared from nowhere. A fresh footmark means someone has just put his or her leg on the floor, on the place, on the steps. So they just saw that someone is putting the footprints on the floor, and they were not able to see who the man is. See? Further footprints followed one after another. Okay, so footprints were following one after another means someone was walking over there, descending the steps and progressing down the street. So they were just looking over there on the steps. They can see naturally, automatically, anyway you can see the footprints were coming on the steps, and it went down towards the street. And the shocking thing is that no one was visible, but the footprints were coming out from nowhere. The boys followed. Okay, so these two boys who had seen these footprints, they started following these footprints. Fascinated. They were fascinated means they were amazed, they were surprised. until the muddy impressions means again footprints, until this muddy footprints became fainter and fainter. Okay, ये तो आप लोगों ने भी देखा होगा that when we put our feet in the mud for some time, when we walk, the imprints of that foot is on the ground, and then after some time the imprints become fainter. Fainter means lighter. So the same thing happened. The muddy impressions now became fainter and fainter, and at last disappeared together. Disappeared together means all together you can see now there were no footprints at all. The explanation of the mystery was really simple enough. So these two boys were not at all worried, or these two boys were not shocked at all. Why? Because they were already knowing what this mystery was about. Mystery means something that is not proved, or something that is still yet to be find out whether it is true or not, or it exists or does not. So the explanation of this mystery was really simple, means they already know what is this thing, from where these impressions are coming. The bewildered boys, bewildered means confused. So these confused boys had been following the scientists who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. So this was not that much level of surprise for these boys, because these two boys were already searching for a scientist, which scientist who had just discovered how to make the human body transparent. Okay, so they were already in search of a scientist, and at that time they saw these footprints, and the person whose footprints it was, a person was not visible. So these boys got it right that it could be that scientist who had just made himself transparent. Let's see what happens next here. Griffin the scientist. Okay, so here comes the name of the scientist. What is the name of the scientist? Griffin. So Griffin, who is the scientist who has made himself invisible, had carried out experiment after experiment to prove that the human body could become invisible. So we can say that this person is very intelligent. He is a good scientist, because after so many experiments, some failed experiments, some half-failed experiments, he was finally able to make a human body invisible. Finally, he swallowed certain rare drugs, and his body became as transparent as a glass, as a sheet of glass. Okay, so he swallowed means he took some rare drugs. Drugs here means medicines and some kind of chemical syrups or anything that he had made. So he took those drugs, and then his body became what? As transparent as a sheet of glass. Means if that person is standing in front of you, you can see through what is behind that person. You will still not able to know that anyone who is invisible is standing in front of you. So he was clearly transparent. Okay, the way glass is, though it also remained as solid as glass. Yes, though it was transparent, it does not mean that you cannot touch the body and can't feel it. You can still feel the body. Why? Because the body was solid. So body was solid, but it was also transparent. Supposing if I become transparent, you can very easily see what is behind me. Okay, I will act as a glass. But if you come ahead and try to pass from this place, you are surely going to dash with me over here. Why? Because I am still solid. I am transparent, but I am solid over there, and you can touch me. Brilliant scientist. So he was. Okay, so he was a brilliant scientist. Of course, we have to agree. He has done such a good experiment, or such an unbelievable experiment of making oneself invisible. But Griffin was rather a lawless person. Okay, what was the problem with Griffin? He was a lawless person. Means he was a person who did not follow law and order. His landlord disliked him and tried to eject him. Okay, landlord means a house is a person in whose house you are living as a tenant, or you pay a rent and live over there. So Griffin had a landlord, and his landlord disliked him. Actually, that is not given in the story clearly, but let me tell you, the landlord was a lady. And as I have read the novel, I can give you some idea, or some I can give you some extra instruction which are not included in this chapter. In reality, Griffin had this landlady who was taking rent from Griffin, but because of attitude of Griffin, she did not like him, and the landlady was also having a cat, and Griffin first implemented his experiment on the cat. So in that experiment, initially he gave those drugs to the cat and that cat became invisible. The landlady was searching for the cat here and there and she was not able to find it. One day when she entered into the room of Griffin, she heard the sound of cat, sounding meow meow, and uh, the landlady said that something is wrong, something you had done with my cat. Why I can hear her voice, but I am not able to see her. Okay, so that was the first time he did experiment, and the experiment was on the cat. And then Griffin did the same experiment on himself. So that was actually the story. So landlady was not happy, and so landlady called her brother. That was, now you can say, the landlord, and he also disliked him, and both of them tried to eject him means throw away from this place in revenge. Okay, to take revenge means to take actions because of the wrong the landlady has done to him. Griffin set fire to the house. So see, this is the attitude of Griffin. Griffin set fire to the same house where he was living, and to get away without being seen, he had to remove his clothes. Now, everyone knew that Griffin was a person who has put on fire on the entire house. So obviously, people are going to run behind him. Police is going to catch him, and then he would be able to. Uh, he would not be able to save himself, and he has to go behind the bars. But then, to save himself, what he did, he had taken all the drugs, and so his body has become invisible. And to save himself, what he did was he removed all his clothes. Okay, as soon as he removed all the clothes, his body became invisible. But if he had worn clothes, it could be visible that yes, someone wearing the clothes is moving here and there. Though his face was not visible, but clothes are visible. Thus, it was that he became a homeless wanderer. Okay, after this incident, it happened that he became homeless without a hope and a wanderer. Wanderer is a person who moves from here to there, here and there, without clothes, without money, and quite invisible. Okay, so Griffin was not having clothes to wear. He can have clothes, but the thing is, if he had worn clothes, he would be identified very easily. So he was without clothes. He was not having money also, because obviously he was a person without money since long time, and he was also quite invisible. Why quite invisible? Because his body could be felt, but it was transparent, until he happened to step in some mud and left footprints as he walked. Okay, so as he was not having clothes, he was not having money, he was just walking barefoot on the road. So at that time, his feet fell into the mud, and when he moved ahead, these two boys had a look at his imprints. I hope everything is clear till here. We are moving ahead. He escaped easily enough from the boys who followed his footprints in London. Yes, it was very easy for him to get away from these boys, because we had seen this foot marks or imprints that were of mud. They became fainter and disappeared. So it was easy for him to hide anywhere in London, because London is a big city. But his adventures were by no means over. Okay, so Griffin was undertaking some kind of adventures, to get your body invisible and try new things is a kind of adventure only. So with these adventures, he moved ahead, and there was no end to his adventures. His adventures went on. He had chosen a bad time of the year to wander, okay, to move around in London. This was the bad time. Why? Because it was London, and he was moving without clothes, and it was midwinter. So, midwinter time in London without clothes, the air was bitterly cold, and he could not do without clothes. The air outside was completely chilled. It was so cold that a person who was there without clothes would obviously feel the cold. See, his body has become transparent, but he could still feel rain, water, air, and other things on his body. So he was feeling completely chilled and cold from inside. And moving without clothes in London was a challenge for him. Instead of walking about the streets, he decided to slip into a big London store for warmth. Yes. So he had an option to move anywhere. He became a wanderer. He was not having a house. So he was just moving here and there on the streets. So then he decided, let me enter into some London store. Now here, if I say London store, that means big shopping marts or shopping malls where all entire thing of the house could be fine. Like we have Big Bazaar and D Marts and Walmarts over here, the same kind of. So he slipped into a London store for warmth, okay, so that he can get some warmth, or he was able to save himself from so much of cold that was outside. So closing time arrived, and as soon as the doors were shut, Griffin was able to give himself the pleasure of clothing and feeding himself without regard to expense. Okay, so the store was about to close down. Now Griffin was inside, and no one knew that he was inside because he was invisible. So as soon as the doors of the store were closed, Griffin came out, and he gave himself pleasure. Means he gave himself happiness of what, of clothing, because he was feeling so cold. As soon as the doors were locked, he took out some clothes from the store, he put on the stores, and feeding himself, he ate something from the store without regard to expense. Means obviously he did not have to pay anything for that, because he had entered into the store unknowing, without notice of anyone, and he was having his food, he was having clothes, and no one knew that he was inside. So there was no expense that he had to pay, because he was already not having money. He broke open boxes and wrappers and fitted himself out with warm clothes. So see what he did? He opened different boxes and wrappers and took out some clothes and put on his body. Soon with shoes and overcoat and a wide brimmed hat. Wide brimmed hat means a sort of round hat. Okay, so he put that hat. He got shoes also from the store. He also got an overcoat which can protect him from cold. He became a fully dressed and visible person. So as soon as he put the dress, he was looking visible. See, looking visible means he has put on clothes on his solid body. So because of clothes, he was visible. But in reality, his eyes, his nose, his face was not visible. Though he was wearing overcoat, his hands inside were not visible. Next. In the kitchen of the restaurant, he found cold meat and coffee, and he followed up the meal with sweets and wine taken from the grocery store. So, as I said, the store was quite huge. He went inside, he opened the restaurant of the, means there is a small restaurant part. If you have gone to a good store, you might have seen there is a small part where they put fast food table or some food. So at that time, when he entered, he found that there was cold meat. Some non-veg was kept over there, and there was coffee. So he had it, and after the meal, he ate sweets and he took wine. From where? From the store, because everything was available in the store, in the grocery store. So finally, he settled down to sleep on a pile of quills. Quills here means actually quills means curtains and covers. So there were bed sheets or covers or the things that were kept over here. There was pile of that. Okay? That means pile means so many of them put together, and this way they look like a bed. And then he jumped onto the pile of those quills. So many covers were kept, so he jumped on all these covers, and he slept, settled down to sleep over there. Means he went there and he slept at that place. So this is quite interesting till now. The rest of it we will do in the next recording, in the next part. Until then, read the story, enjoy the story, and go through all the difficult words and various things that you can notice are quite astonishing in this story. So we'll continue in the next one.